formatting it here, but when one thinks about Marlborough, one thinks about Cloudy Bay. There's no question it's one of those wines you always, one always remembers the first time you ever tasted a glass of Cloudy Bay. Dog Point certainly is up there from a quality point of view. What I didn't realize is they have vines dating back to the late 1970s. And certainly in terms of New Zealand wine history, that's a long time back. If you think about Centro Otago, it's around about 1987. If you're thinking about Adorangi and Martinborough, it's probably in the 80s. Greg, I think that's right, the mid-80s, Adorangi and Dry River. But what makes this so interesting, and possibly might be a really strong reason as to why this label is at such an advantage to so much else in Marlborough, is this vine age. I remember the very first time I visited Dog Point with Lou, we went and tasted. We got to the winery after getting lost several times. We sat down at the cellar door, and Matthew's father and business partner James Healy said, "Right, we're going to do a backdated vertical of Sauvignon Blancs," and my heart sank. The idea of tasting 10-year-old Sauvignon Blanc, even out of Cork, especially out of Cork, I thought that I wasn't gonna make the afternoon. And it was really interesting to see how that varietal really does evolve when it's taken care of, and when it has this kind of crunchy minerality that only comes from wine made in absolutely the right style. So let's have a sniff of the Sauvignon Blanc and see what we're looking at. It's quite interesting. I think I sent in the note to you guys to have them super cold, number 1 and 2. And they can definitely handle being cold. What's interesting for me is I'm not getting the classic cat's pea and cut grass kind of nose, which always seems to be their classic tell.
So this is
for me, it's definitely more subtle and quieter. There's a certain creaminess and a perfumed kind of phenolic to the nose. And there's a promise as well that the aromatics on the nose, there's a promise of minerality, crispness and cleanness. And that's really awesome, because so often what puts me off about Sauvignon Blanc as a varietal is a kind of cloying, overly passion fruity kind of action. You're not getting that here at all. Clean, fresh. There's almost a kind of crunchiness about it in the acidics. It's a little bit light on flavor for now. And what I'd suggest we actually do is we go back and look at it as it gets slightly warmer, as it warms up a little more, and see what it does with that. Yeah, there's that tropical herbaceousness you're probably going to find in the mid to back palate, but there's definitely a long linear aromatic to the wine that's really crunchy. I'm thinking a little bit more of ocean, ozone, and that kind of ocean freshness, saltiness in the nose, and certainly there's a sense of saltiness in the back palate as well.
Oh, it's a lot less sharp than the 18. The 18 was very acidic, very cervic. This is smoother.
Yeah, mate, that's exactly right. I remember the 18 being way more aggressive, kind of like grabbing at you, whereas this is definitely a softer, more mellowed kind of tamer approach, which is interesting. What would be great to understand from Matthew is the vintage differences as to exactly what happened in terms of rain and heat. I dare say that 19 was probably a little bit wetter, which might have muted the fruit characteristics at this early stage.
Sorry, Rob, what year is number 1?
2019. What I'm quite excited about tonight is looking at the second one, the barrel ferment. I understand that it's about a 70% barrel ferment from the 13, but they're so confident about the quality that they're deciding to hold these back now and actually only release them much later. So keep a little bit of that 19. So, and we'll come back to it a little bit later on.
Hey, Robert.
Mm.
So you talk about the acidity, a little bit of saltiness. I mean, is this because the vineyard near an ocean? I mean, why do you get
No,
that?
it's just a function of terroir. I mean, certainly where these vines sit in Marlborough, they are partially irrigated by fog coming in off, but it's not the kind of Margaret River kind of influence where you're, maybe a kilometer away from the ocean. As I recall seeing these particular vines, they're kind of hilly. They're a little bit higher. Certainly, the altitude from the ocean is significant, and I think these are irrigated. This certainly isn't dry grown. So I dare say what's happened in this vintage, and Phil's right. I think you'll probably find that 18 was hotter, and drier towards harvest time, and 19 was probably a little bit more even. And at towards the end, and probably a little bit more rain. So we'll see what they say about that. The other thing to bear in mind is Stelvin. One of the things that's quite interesting about Stelvin is how it seems to stop the development of the wine entirely. And what's particularly interesting, if you guys want to amble on towards the section 94, which I haven't forwarded yet.
Hey, Robert, can I just interrupt for a minute?
Yep.
I've got another, one of the export guys from Dog Point, Jackie's name is.
All right,
and
great.
he's trying to log in on the moment. So he's really knowledgeable rather than, because we can't find Matt. He's ready to go. We just need well, Matt's probably got trouble with the link.
Yeah.
But Jack's really good. So
that's fine. We'll just keep moving till someone in New Zealand.
So can he just log in if I send him the details? He can join in. All right. So his name's Jack. Okay.
I'm gonna. Sorry, guys. Sorry to hold up. I'm gonna send another invite to you, Greg. Can you just WhatsApp me and I'll send the invite to you.
To me or to Jack?
I'll ask Greg to ask Lou to do it. Lou, could you forward your invite to Greg so he can forward it to the winemaker?
Okay, he's ready to go.
All right, just send him that. Send him your email. It'll have the link in it.
My email?
Yeah, the invite that everyone got.
Yep. Okay. All right. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. So, guys, did you go to
Let me give him a call. I'll put myself on silent here.
All right. If you go to this number 2, the section 94, this is now a barrel fermented style, again of all Sauvignon Blanc. Key differences, aside from the fact that you're looking at a 6-year bottle difference in age, is the section 94 is in cork. And these days, when it comes to aromatics, I have a heart attack looking at cork bottles. But it's going to be interesting to see, because there's no question that has a role.
Hey,
in the
Jack, how you doing? We can't find Matt.
Sorry?
We can't find Matt. It's Greg Corra.
Yeah, okay, Greg. Yeah, sure. I'm just...
Sorry, high technology. The sniff is definitely a lot more density in the nose.
Robert, Ross Turnbull.
Yeah,
hi.
hey.
What's the oak?
It's going to be French, mate, and it's going to be probably not new barrels, judging by the nose. It smells a little bit to me like it's a couple of years old. In terms of the barrel, it's not overt, so you're not getting major vanilla or coconut action at all. But there's a sense of presence in the oak all the way through, from in nose and palate. It's definitely there. I think the most important thing that it's lending is weight. Your mid palate is this beautiful, luscious depth, and I'm pretty confident that the oak's lending quite a lot to that experience.
You definitely see the oak in the palate. But...
Yeah, Robert, I don't know if I'm crazy. I do get some curry leaves on the nose,
Oh, really? So maybe curry leaves or a lime, because I'm getting more the kaffir lime kind of nose on it.
We've got the curry leaves here as well.
Have you really?
Second that motion.
I'll consider myself outvoted. It's a really glossy, fantastic depth to it.
It's good, bro.
You know, we were just talking earlier before we started the tasting that trying to sell a barrel-aged Sauv of this age, this was pulled back by the winery 2 years ago, and they decided, they pulled it back in 2016, decided because of the quality of it, decided to hold on. And it certainly paid off. Bob Campbell gives it 96, which is no mean feat for a Sauvignon Blanc. They suggesting that this and Tekoko are probably the two most famous and quality-wise, the most respected in this kind of style. What I'd like to ask of Jack when he comes online is just how many months it stayed in ferment on their lees to impart that kind of biscuity, almondy kind of thing on the nose. There's also great acid because you're getting a sense of cleanness about the wine, which is really good.
Yeah, Rob, in answer to the oak question, it's 100% neutral French oak.
Neutral French, okay. Makes sense.
So does that help, Robert? Does it help with the aging? I mean, it looks like pretty old wine, 7+.
Yeah, well, they say that oak lends tannins in a way, and by, as Lou pointed out, being neutral oak, not imparting any of that sort of that kind of grippy, nasty kind of components of tannin. It's really just adding a gloss and a veneer to the wine. If you combine that with very good acids, you've got a product that really speaks two kinds of languages. One that's aromatic and vibrant, and another which has some depth and gravitas. I'm getting the curry. I'm not getting, but definitely lime, and then into the stone fruit, sort of Nashi pear, that kind of thing. But right at the back for me, it's more about citrus.
So how long do you think we can keep it?
I would say another 2 years in this kind of condition. As to how it performs beyond that, all we can do is compare it to the French in terms of the way they produce their wine. And they would suggest that it has a 10 or 15 year road ahead of it.
And Rob, that's why Ivan, etc., the winery has decided to hold back the release, because they believe that we're all Philistines and we've been drinking it way too young.
Yes.
So they're holding it back and saying, no, you're killing our children. So we're going to give it to you when it's 7 years old. We know you're going to drink it within 3 years, and that's the perfect window. So that's
I see. So that fits. Yeah.
Hi there. Look, Jack Nash has just signed in from Dog Point in Australia.
How are you, mate?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I'm very good. Listen, I'll spare you the long and lengthy CV that I was about to regale about Matthew and the hierarchy of the family, and throw you in the deep end, because we've just tasted so far the Sauv 19, and we're just working through the section 94-13. But question on the 19, what we're feeling is that it's slightly softer and more muted than the 18 at this stage a year ago. And we were wondering whether that's a factor of climate. Was there something that happened? Wetter maybe in 19?
Yes, 18 was a little leaner and cooler, whereas like 19 and even this current vintage, it was a really sort of dry, really warm summer with lots of sunlight days. So we got probably better ripeness. And, sometimes it's probably, because of the Sauvignon Blanc, we use about 50% wild ferment. So that tends to, give it a certain richness and texture. And that really identifies that particular year.
I think the winner for me in this 19 is the minerality. There's a crispy, crunchy kind of component to it, which I think is really alluring. And I think that's probably going to place it at a level above the 18, just in terms of that kind of style. It's something that if you're into this particular style of Sauv, that's something that's a real moneymaker generally. So really happy with that component. The other question we had for you was, how old are the oldest Sauvignon Blanc vines in Dog Point? At Dog Point?
91 at this stage. Definitely, 1991.
Right.
So usually, I suppose vines tend to perform at their peak, in between that sort of 20 to 30 year gap for Sauvignon Blanc. But yeah, that's how old our vines are at the moment.
Right, got it. And there's always this analogy that whenever Ivan and James used to visit us in Singapore, I used to constantly be in trouble for drawing an analogy to Cloudy Bay. But I was wondering, how does that compare in vine age to the Cloudy Bay vines?
I think that probably, Cloudy Bay are continually doing what a lot of Sauvignon Blanc producers are doing. So after X amount of years, they're probably just ripping them out, and grafting them off and planting again.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. That's super interesting. So then moving on to the section 94, we've worked out that it's neutral oak. We've worked out that it's not 100% barrel ferment, or am I wrong?
No, it's 100%. Yeah, so with section 94, it's a particular vineyard, and that vineyard site, back in the day, that was the top fruit that used to go to Cloudy Bay. But then obviously when we started taking over, we took over Dog Point, that always goes into section. So again, we hand pick everything, and we whole bunch press. And what we tend to do, once we've whole bunch pressed gently, it goes straight into Francois Frias barrels. And it undergoes 100% natural ferment, wild fermentation. And we just leave it in barrel for 18 months and on solids, and we just leave it. So, yeah, I suppose, it's quite unique in style, but again...
what I was saying, my 2 cents worth really was why it's so enduring is that it still has vibrant acidity and fruit. Yes. And then bolted onto that is a whole different game of depth and gravitas. Matt. Really, really great.
Oh, not bad. We managed to...
So that's certainly that combination of the two elements is something that I'm really in love with. What is your feeling on cellaring? We thought maybe now in 2 years, now in 3 years.
I think you're probably bang on there. Yeah, I think now in the next 2 years, but it's still got lovely vibrancy. And there's a lovely richness and I suppose a little bit sort of dusty and earthiness about it as well. And I don't know, it's one of those wines, it pairs with so much food, but it just changes in the glass. It's because it has been closed off for such a long period of time. Yeah. But it's a pretty.
It certainly had a kind of smelliness to it initially. And when I was opening, because we opened 5 or 6 bottles today of each for everybody. And I was really conscious when I was opening these, being cork, that I had to be really, really careful. And it was so interesting. There was a uniformity about it, and there was a smelliness to it as they were opening. I thought, oh, yes, here comes trouble. But literally within 5 to 10 minutes of them being opened, totally changed. And certainly in Singapore, we're not in an ambient climate where everything's cold and frosty. And any wine that you put in a glass gets bloody warm bloody quickly as a rule. Yeah. And tasting, I mean, I kept mine very, very cold, but in the 15 minutes or so that it's been open, it's evolving all the time. It starts to remind me from a textural point of view, a lot of back old Semillons, Hunter Semillons. It's got that kind of thing. It's got some of the characteristics of Chenin Blanc, very old Chenins, Noir Chenins. Yes. Starts to develop that glorious glossiness and heaviness to it. Really, it's a big one.
I think, you're right about the Chenin Blanc. And I think, when you first open it, it's almost there's sort of a little bit of sort of asparagus coming out. But then after that 5 minutes, that blows off. And then you start getting those lovely, sometimes you get those sort of, you can get some sort of marmalade characters will start coming out. Even sometimes like a mandarin sort of character comes through.
Awesome. It's really good.
Yes. And I mean, it ages really well. When we first make the section 94, it can be quite flinty, quite reductive. And I think what Matt's worked out over the years, the longer we leave it, the more integrated that becomes. And it becomes quite every time we open up a new bottle that's aged, we're going, oh, how good's that? How good's that? Let's leave it longer. I mean, I believe, so, that's something it's evolved with Dog Point. Something we're really proud of is what we always, our sort of ethos is, capturing the year, but we really want our wines to age gracefully. And that's why we handpick and whole bunch gently press. and leaving it on solids. Solids is like, the footprint, the stamp of that year.
Yeah. It's kind of ballsy though, this kind of approach that the owners have taken. I mean, holy hell, 7 years cash carry before it even hits the market. Now, I'm sure in the long run, it's going to, without question, put you guys so far ahead of the competition that it will definitely pay off. And certainly a big winner for me tonight, the 94. Thanks so much. So we're moving.
We're quite fortunate. We're very fortunate because we'll keep. We're organic. All our vineyards are organic, so we actually we keep 30% of the best fruit for Dog Point, and we have that ability. We have some good contacts where we can sell 70%. So we have that cash flow. So that enables us to sell our wines. It also it enables us, I suppose, to do everything by hand and leaving things in barrel for 18 months and doing very much hands-on.
Time.
Yes.
It's the real recipe.
Question. Before we move on.
Sorry, what's that, mate?
You said natural fermentation. Is that like with lambics and the beer in Belgium, where they open it up to the environment and wind blows in the yeast and then let it ferment?
Yeah, and I think, basically there's always a bit of yeast out in the vineyard, but in the winery, especially with Sauvignon Blanc, usually Pinot, you make Pinot first, then Chardonnay, and then the Sauvignon Blanc. So there's just natural yeast in the air, and it just naturally catches on. Yep, exactly.
Not adding anything to it. You're just.
That's a little bit like the boys at Forager, where they do their yeast ferment Pinot Noir in the vineyard, and literally the barrels sit out there and the birds poop in and grasshoppers carry some pollen over and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Sometimes it
must be a nerve-wracking thing to actually embark on, that's for sure.
Question, is this wine an annual wine, or is it as and when the vintage permits?
We usually, with the 13, like with our barrel wines, we tend to release in November every year. So in November, that's when we'll roll to the 14 Section 94. So we want to have sort of a 7-year post-vintage. That's what we've discovered with Section 94. And that's where we believe it's really sort of hitting its straps and starting to drink really well.
And Jack, what's your feeling of 13 to 14 in terms of quality?
Well, 14, another great year, but probably the most difficult year we had was 17. It was, but 14, it was off the top of my head. I do think it started off cool at the beginning, and then we got some lovely warm sunshine. But 14 is under screw cap. That's the first year. So it'll be a little bit different, probably a little bit more. I suppose probably a little bit more acidity there, probably not as much development, but it still has that classic reduction and richness that the wild ferment and being on solids for 18 months has.
Okay. So that's going to be quite a strong argument for people to lift this 13, because it's kind of the end of an era. It's the end of Section 94 in Cork.
Yeah. And the thing is, we love Cork. We also love screw cap. We had to make a decision at some point. We don't have a problem with it. We're still getting those lovely characters that you get with Section 94. So, I definitely think you won't be disappointed. That's for sure.
All right. Thanks for that. Moving on to the Chardonnay. The first thing I thought when I opened it today was struck match. I got so much of that match kind of action, and it stayed there. So from decanting at about 2 o'clock to driving it all over Singapore to opening it now, it's retained that kind of theme.
It's always had that lovely flintiness. I suppose the 17. We actually hand sorted a little bit of the fruit in 17 because 17 was a great year for Pinot and Chardonnay, because Pinot came off first and the Chardonnay, but then it started getting a little bit wet and cold towards right at the end of the Chardonnay vintage. So we actually did a little bit of hand sorting, but we still got lovely purity of fruit. We hand picked, we crop it about, you're looking at probably 4.5 tons per hectare. Which is quite low, but again, hand picking enables us, if there are any imperfections in the fruit, we just drop them onto the floor. Again, we gently press this wine, whole bunch press, and it goes straight into barrel, about 15% new barrel, Burgundian oak, Francois Frias. you know, probably averages out being medium toast. And with New Zealand being cool climate, where we have this ability to, it goes through secondary fermentation, so it's 100% malolactic. And then we just leave
filtered, or is it filtered?
There's no fining, okay. But it's minimal filtration.
Yeah, because I couldn't make the call on that because it has this real density of mouthfeel on it. It's definitely got this real presence, gravitas in the middle palate. I couldn't make it. Yeah. Couldn't tell the difference.
A lot of that comes down to, we're really lucky at Dog Point. We have a lot of the cloners, the Chardonnay cloners, predominantly Mendoza for this wine, and it has the little small grapes and the big grapes, so you get lovely richness, but then you get lovely racy acidity as well, and that gives the wine a little bit of power.
So the grape itself is producing different sizes of grapes, so they're actually adding
the
different
bunches.
That's so fascinating because it's actually adding different characteristics to the final product. I'd never thought of it in those terms.
That's what makes it quite special, that clone. And something, when Sauvignon Blanc really took off in the early 80s in Marlborough, we're really blessed. We've got the clay soils where Dog Point is very different. What we did, a lot of people pulled out the Chardonnay clones, all the Chardonnay in Marlborough, because they were getting more value for Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah, so we kept all our Chardonnay vines, and now those vines are the oldest in Marlborough. So that they're from plantings date back to 1981.
That's serious bragging rights. I'm going to use that next time we show Chardonnay. That's brilliant.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, they don't yield a lot, but they're very special, and they you know, even this year in 2020, you know, they were coming down, and we'll just eat, you know, we're just tasting them and eating and just knowing how good and how much flavour they actually have.
The big win for me, because I think I've fallen in and out of love with Chardonnay at least 4 times that I can remember. At the moment, I'm in love, and the big thing that I'm always looking for is a presence of oak, but not an overt presence. The texture needs to be weighty and glossy, and it's delivering on both those elements. And I suspect that this intensity of fruit is going to remain as it sellers. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime quickly. I think that the wine as a character is going to retain itself for quite some time to come. It's definitely a cellaring. It's got some potential cellaring in it, that's for sure.
Oh, no, it does. And it has, like I said, it's got that power, but it's got that lovely acidity from a 17. So it's a little bit racy on the palate, which is, it's got focus. That's what I quite love about the 17.
It's exactly the right phrase, yeah.
Hey, Robert, can you hear me?
Matthew.
Yeah, I'm in. I just ran halfway across the city. Because I completely cocked up the time, but I thought I was smart and had it all under control. But you've got the better one out of us anyway. So
we've been rock and rolling with Jack. It's all good.
Yeah, I started to panic slightly. I was looking at my clock, going, I've still got 40 minutes, but apparently I didn't.
Well, I can never understand whether the New Zealand cows like daylight saving or not. Daylight saving. I could never work out Australia, New Zealand daytime.
No, exactly, but I'm here. I've actually been here for 5 or 2 minutes listening to Jack. So I was here for 40 minutes.
So you know where we were at with the wines.
Yeah, have you just finished section 94?
We just working our way through the Chardonnay. What I didn't realise was these Chardonnay vines are the oldest in Marlborough now, because everybody else pulled theirs out.
Yeah. No, we have phylloxera through the 80s, and Jack was probably talking about that. But so the oldest vines go back to 81. They're still on their own roots. So we've got an average vine age of probably 25 or 26 years now across.
So unlike the Sauvignon Blancs, where we learned tonight that it's after a 20-year period, it's probably time to put graft over or put new ones in. When it comes to New Zealand Chardonnay vines, do you let them run like Pinot vines, or is it something that just goes for decades, or not?
Yeah, well, I think they vines will naturally devigor over time. But what we're finding with Chardonnay and Pinot is you need to get the concentration and depth of flavour which comes with vine age. So if you look at the old world, if you just look at Burgundy, they've probably got an average vine age of 40 to 60 years. And, you know, we're talking about Dog Point with a vine age of maybe 26 years in Chardonnay and 23 in Pinot as an average.
In Pinot, yeah.
So we've got a long way to go, but you do have to start thinking about, you know, replanting programs and how we're sort of getting to that point now where we've got to start thinking about that because
next gen, yeah.
Yeah, we still have phylloxera in those vines with their own roots, but eventually they will have to be replaced. So we're sort of starting to think about that at the moment.
It's probably an interesting segue into the Pinot now because I remember distinctly 5 vintages ago, Dog Point Pinot turning the corner for me as in terms of vine age. I still remember it thinking, gosh, this has all of a sudden become a different, this is not a Marlborough Pinot anymore. It's become, it's come of age. There's that kind of savory component and textural finesse in it that I don't remember 10 years ago out of Pinot in Marlborough. And I remember it so well, and I went back and read a little bit about it, trying to understand, and it was such a momentous change. And so it's not climatic. It's actually those vines are ready to start yielding the right kind of juice.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, Jack's probably been answering better than me, but I think what you had back in the, particularly through the 90s, is you had all the, and even though it's been to Marlborough, I'm just going through the Zoom and just seeing who's about. I see like there's a table of 10 having dinner, and this is quite good.
Yeah. We've even got some people from Italy tonight.
Yeah, I was just looking at Will Carnwath's table. It looks like they're having quite a good night in there. Yeah.
It's a quiet Thursday at Will.
Yeah, I like it. We've gone back into lockdown over here, so this is all. Okay. I'm just sort of slowly working my way through and seeing who's in here. This is looking great. But look, the Pinot Noir was on the valley floor, and it was with sort of all the Pinot originally was clone suitable for sparkling wine production.
Yep.
And it was on the sort of free draining gravel soils. So what you had was these sort of really fruity, thin Pinots, and you know, it was one of those things where the sugars used to race because the soils were so stony as well. The canopies get really warm even overnight, so you wouldn't really necessarily can keep hold of your acidity. So you sort of had these lean styles of Pinot Noir, and really it's only in the last probably 10 to 15 years where people have relocated to the southern valleys, which is those clay-influenced soil types on the south side of Marlborough, and establishing the Pinot Noir there. And it's just you're just seeing I guess the quality of Pinot Noir and Marlborough just taking huge leap forwards to the point where I'd match the best, 10 or 12 from Marlborough against any in New Zealand, Central, Lycra or Martinborough. But it is very site specific. And
I mean, from a sales point of view, it's probably one of the hardest things to do. Marlborough is all about Sauvignon Blanc. So for me as a white shoe shuffling salesman, to tell somebody that Pinot Noir from Marlborough, hello, you've got to think about it. It's going to, it's quite a task. But again, thankfully, thanks to these kinds of tasting, people can really look at it and see. I mean, my overall impression on the nose is this beautiful waxy phenolic that's just easing out of the nose. Maybe some bright red characteristics on it, and then the savoriness, which is such a winner for me.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we do is try and pick a little bit earlier, and we're cropping quite low. So we're in that sort of 4.5 to 5 tonne per hectare, which is, you're talking between Premier Cru and Grand Cru Burgundy in terms of cropping rate. And, 1 bunch per shoot. And again, sort of higher density planting, you talk about Sauvignon, it's about 1,850 vines per hectare.
Yep. And
then the Pinot Noir in our hills is more like 4,000. So it's about half of what, say, a Burgundy vineyard is, but it's still higher than the traditional spacing in Marlborough. Yep. So cropping low, higher density plants, and really is starting on the vineyard side and then throwing out any imperfect bunches. And I think one thing we do is try and pick a little bit earlier than a lot, because we don't want to go into that stewed fruit sort of really ripe spectrum. We want that more savory, earthy component to develop. And I think, trying to get that physiological balance on the vine and getting the bricks slightly lower means we are achieving that a bit more, and that's without going into the green spectrum, which we don't want to do either.
No, you don't. I mean, if I was to have my back against the wall and compare Centro-Targo Pinot to Marlborough Pinot, and you guys as the benchmark, what I'm really loving is not that crazy full frontal spice construct. There's a softness, an eloquence, a delicacy about it, and certainly creaminess. I'm getting quite a lot of creamy evolution on the back palate of this Pinot, and I love it because it has this kind of height to it and poise to it, which is really relevant and certainly specific to its place. I think it's great. I couldn't put this anywhere else other than Marlborough as Pinot.
Yeah, well, I think
shows its place.
It does, and I think what we do get in Marlborough is really nice, soft, sort of supple tannins, and we have to work hard to get the concentration and that depth of flavour that we've been talking about, and we're getting a better understanding of what it takes to achieve that. But if you compare that to, say, Central Otago, probably their biggest challenge is toning it down. So we've got, two opposite ends of the island dealing with maritime climate versus a continental climate, and the extremes of nature that sort of vary around it. And it is quite diverse. And as anyone that's been to New Zealand, it's say 2,000 to 2,500 kilometres from the top to the bottom, but it's very narrow and thin. So you're getting these different climatic sort of
dramatic changes,
all the way down. And so we used to plant Cabernet and Sauvignon through the 70s and 80s, and thank God we ripped those out because they were green as grass, and it just didn't taste good at all. And for someone like Greg Corr sitting in Australia, which is a Semillon stronghold, he'd be he wouldn't think much of it at all. So it's and it's about sort of narrowing the focus for us. And I think particularly with that Pinot, though, we tend to exist in that red berry spectrum. So you're talking that sort of cherry, violet, even slight raspberry with sort of spicy kind of baking spice undertones. So that's
what I love about it, though, is it doesn't dig deeper into the sort of gothic, darker kind of fruit spectrum. I love its nuance. I love the sort of the lightness about it in terms of the fruits components. But with that is this beautiful, rounded, evolved texture, which I can probably get a little bit too romantic, as my partners tell me I'm getting too herbal about it. But there's definitely, it has that kind of finesse and finish to it that I really, really love. And the thing from a sales point of view, what I really love about it is its price point. And for us to show this kind of quality under $60 in Singapore is a rarity, and something that I'm really happy to be able to do, because if one was to line up all these kind of these super successful ratings, this would be one of the least expensive Pinots in that sort of super premium bracket. It definitely makes it a grab.
Yeah, like I think, we never set out with a world domination plan. We just want to be regionally distinctive and actually be reachable for people. So I feel, we have a very high cost structure, even with, Jack would have talked about the hand picking, and particularly with something like Sauvignon, and it goes all the way through. And we do have a high cost base, but we're trying to keep a level where it is representative of what we do, but it's not out of the realms of reachability for people to drink it, because the biggest kick at the end of the day for us is when you see someone else enjoying it. So I think what we're seeing now, though, is a real understanding of particularly Chardonnay and more so Pinot, but Sauvignon was, in a funny way, it's a little bit like the Achilles heel, really. I mean, it's so dominant and so important, but it's almost taken the limelight away from what else.
No doubt about it. There's no question, because when I talk to people about Marlborough wines, it's a default setting, right? Sauvignon Blanc and primary stainless steel Sauvignon Blanc, and it's so cool that you guys have had the foresight to develop a program of wines that actually take the region more seriously on a bigger spectrum. It's really impressive. Thanks for that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, well, but I actually think that 17 Pinots in that darker, sort of slightly darker fruits, like it's a little bit like 15. And I think because of the year, it was a warmer year. And I was just watching, I think Phil Hall there. Phil, you were just, when I was just talking about that, you were getting your nose stuck into the 17 Pinot. But as I was talking about red berries, but it definitely, we're seeing that slightly darker spectrum of fruit there. And, Marlborough actually tends to exist in slightly more of that red berry spectrum. But, it's just what you will see with us is vintage variation. We're not going to try and strip flavour or cover something that didn't exist in the first place. It tells a story, and we want to be able to sort of show that. So I'm
loving the characteristic of this Pinot being finished and ready to drink now. There's quite a lot of other 17 Pinots around the plot that really have got so much longer to go. This is approachable so brilliantly at an early stage.
Well, and actually one of the reasons, and one of the reasons we go to barrel for 18 months is to try and get more secondary characters before we go to bottle.
Right, and that's the advantage.
And exactly. Yeah. So it's and it will develop in time, but look, on the whole, I think New Zealand Pinot's drunk far too young. Generally speaking.
Without doubt.
So we're trying to do a little bit more with age releases and things, but I think. The great thing about it is we do want to see the fruit, and I think you do get that, particularly in New Zealand Pinot, you do see the fruit, and I guess that makes New Zealand Pinot what it is, because we're not trying to hide that, and it's part of the.
Well, I noticed on your site you now have a library area, which is a real ballsy thing. I mean, there's not a lot of wineries around who can actually offer on a commercial scale wines that go back 10 years. It's sensational. And what I wanted to ask of you, Matt, is maybe we can work something out with the followers of Dog Point here in Singapore, where we can figure out what you've got as a back vintage that we can do in this format, actually taste with you as a library thing. We'll work on that maybe for later this year. So that'd be great. Before we wrap up, a couple of questions that came through on the chat room. Where am I? I've already answered that one. Yes, the fact that you guys have gone so easily from first generation to second generation in Dog Point has been such a seamless thing. And there's instances where I've noticed in the past where that's not been quite so easy.
I don't think it's been that seamless, but it probably looks like it from the outside. Yeah.
All I can say is, as a distributor of your products, it's been so cool because Ivan and James, we've had some hell nights in Singapore, and I certainly hope we can do the same when you come visit us again. But
exactly. But I'll have to get my watch sorted out, because clearly I'm not doing that very well.
No, that's okay. Look, I feel quite badly with the Napa winemakers, because I make them get up at 2 in the morning or something to do these tastings, and they're falling asleep in their glasses. So this is not too bad. Guys, very good effort. I'm going to do a recording of this tonight, and there is a special discount available to anyone who's joined us tonight. So I'll be sending that over to you with a discount code for any of the product that we've got available on the site right now for Dog Point. I'll try and figure this out tonight. If not, you'll get it first thing in the morning, but for tomorrow only. So my thanks to Jack for stepping in the breach, mate. Thank you so much. This kind of technology.
I think I could have kept talking. I was on a bit of a roll. I was just warming up.
I'm not going to hear the end of this, Robert. You know that, don't you?
It's a question from Anne-Marie. Yes, it was Mendoza Clone, the Chardonnay. Yeah.
Predominantly, yes.
Predominantly. Okay, got it. All right, thank you so much. Enjoy the lockdown in New Zealand. We can always send you some tips on how to survive in case.
You too.
And I'm quite serious about that back vintage, Maddie. Let's try and figure that out and see if we can work it out with Greg.
Sorry.
Yeah, it'll be the 11th.
Yeah. Jacob, yeah?
Yeah, sorry about that. Regarding the 2013 Section 94, so when I tasted it, I thought, okay, there got to be new oak on this one, but I later learned that it's actually neutral oak, so old oak. But can you tell us a little bit about the winemaking, why it could like be mistaken as new oak?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's funny. I've been talking about that a bit today, actually, because it's, I mean, the way we describe it is almost like a Sauvignon Blanc for Chardonnay lovers. So it's the way we,
good definition.
yeah. Well, the viticulture is quite similar to the tank fermented style or the sort of classic style, and I think the best way to describe it, I guess, is in terms of lees and contact with lees and barrel. So with the traditional sort of tank fermented style, we'll go to tank for 3 days and let it settle. You know, so all the solids. So if you think about a glass of orange juice or a freshly squeezed orange juice, and you put it in the fridge and you leave it, and you always shake it up before you drink it because that's where the flavor is. And it's the same concept with wine. So we'll put it into a tank and we'll leave it for 3 days, and then the clear juice is on the top, and then all the solids is on the bottom. And so for the classic style, we'll take that clear juice and a little bit of the sort of cloudier juice towards the bottom, and we'll ferment that. But with the Section 94, we only press to a tank and then we go to barrel straight away. So we're not settling the juice or clarifying it. So it's full solids and full lees. So that's like all the pulp and the juice, and you know that all goes into the barrel. So it's all about evolution and barrel on lees to impart textural complexity. And I think if you think about the vessel, the barrel is a vessel to hold the ferment rather than trying to get oak in the wine. So it's sort of this long and slow evolution, and it's 100% wild yeast. And it can sometimes take 14 or 15 months to go through fermentation. So it's really long and slow, and it starts and stops depending on what's happening, you know, with the weather and things. But and the winery can get a bit hot, but cold, and things start and stop, and it's just the way it is. But actually, the first one we made, we had to delay the release of it because it hadn't finished fermentation. So Ivan and James were slightly packing themselves at the time because it wasn't working the way that they envisaged. But what you find is we're not huge fans of new oak around Sauvignon, because once you lose that primary fruit, that Sauvignon, new oak barrel is all you start to see. So, and it starts to dominate it. Whereas what we're trying to do is use the lees contact to give us the texture, but sort of hang on to the acidity as well and get that ageability. And that's why you're drinking 2013, because with that wine now, and we're trying to roll that out across the world, as we want that wine coming out 7 years post vintage, because the style we do is so solids influenced that you do get an elevated level of well, we do get more sort of reduction, but we're trying to do that, and we're trying to get that, and that's that struck match kind of character that you can probably pick up in the wine. A little bit like gunflint, or some authors say it's a little bit of that burnt sort of rubber character that, you know, I don't necessarily use that, but people have told me that, so it's your own. But
yeah, I prefer match, burnt match. It smells easier than burnt rubber.
Everyone will be sitting there getting different stuff, but for me, it's, what happens is that character integrates into the wine over time in bottle, and then what you're left with is this sort of freshness and this texture, but you've still got this sort of liveliness to it, and behind it, you'll pick it up a little bit there now as you get this white floral character, sort of white flower blossom, sort of elderflower, and that is right in behind that kind of smoky, yeasty sort of struck match character. And as it ages, that sort of floralness comes to the front even more so. So, you know, I look at that 13 and I go, well, that's got at least, you know, that'll probably go another 10 years, to be honest. I mean, it's still got plenty of time, and you can put it in a decanter as well. If you're trying to, if you want that to blow off a little bit, just tip it in a decanter for 10 minutes before you drink it. And that makes the world of difference. But one thing we don't do on that wine is we don't do any malolactic fermentation or secondary ferment, because we want to retain the acidity and the freshness in the wine. So I said it's kind of made in a Chardonnay style, or like our Chardonnay, but we don't want it to taste like Chardonnay. So we want to keep the acidity and that varietal character of Sauvignon Blanc, but we don't actually put Sauvignon on the front of the labels, because if people buy Section 94 expecting that first one, they often, you know, well, they're a little bit confused. If people want a Marlborough Sauvignon and then they get given Section 94, that it's not necessarily what they're looking for. So we try to think of it as its own sort of, has its own sort of personality, and it's very much driven by that vineyard, but it is a much different style of winemaking with that wine. And, you know, we're only doing about 2,000 cases a year of it, so it's not huge, but it's definitely pushing the boundaries of what that variety can do. So I think what you're seeing is just, you know, there's nothing in Marlborough that tastes quite like it. I mean, there's a lot of really barrel fermented styles of Sauvignon that are fantastic, but this, we sort of have a particular way of doing it.
Yeah, mate, you've got this bright, you've got this great aromatic acid structure, but a glossy depth and gravitas to it that you know, obviously my default setting is to cocoa, and I think for what my 2 cents worth, I'm loving this more. I love the subtlety, the integration, the fact that the acids are still so bright. It's more of a package for me as it sits right now.
No, absolutely. And we don't want to go into that fat sort of creamy vein.
Correct, yeah. It's retained its eloquence. It's really great.
Exactly. So that's why we try and avoid that malo as well. So it's, it is just a different, completely different sort of style of winemaking, I guess.
Yeah,
we get it. Yeah. Viticulture is quite similar between the two.
Terrific. Well, guys, thanks so much for having us. Maddie, we'll see you soon.
Yes, yeah, pleasure. Sorry, I was late by about.
Mate, don't worry. No, Jack held the fort admirably. Thank you so much, Jack. I appreciate it. I hope we didn't throw you out of dinner or anything like that. Thanks, guys.
Are you still in lockdown for a wee while? Or?
What, us in Singapore? Oh, indefinitely. We kind of live that way now. So it's sort of, it's a phase 2. We're not sure when what'll change. Everything's fine though.
How big's the how big are gatherings you allowed?
5. They're saying it'll go to 10 quite soon, but at the moment only 5. So, mate, I don't want to go back to formal wine dinners. I love this. I can do 3 or 4 days a week. It's fantastic.
Well,
so everybody who's still online, we're doing the Gaia Makanda next Friday night. If you're interested, there's still seats available for that. I'm really looking forward to deep diving into the Super Tuscans from Bulgaria. So Matt, Jack, Greg, thank you so much for tonight. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the support.
All right. Take it easy. See you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
No.
Jacob, that's section 94. Oh, he's gone. Greg, thanks for the tech backup. Jeez. So it was a timing thing, was it? Greg?
Oh yeah, no, he correct.
Okay.
He